Hi Rowan and Ryan, Marines and sailors and soldiers and airmen and even coasties. Today I'm going to read, this is from Gilbert's book, Tanks in Hell, and it's the Marine Corps Tanks Company, a Marine Corps tank company on Tarwa. And Tarwa was a bloody little battle that started on November 20th, 1943, and it lasted for 3 days. It took them 3 days to capture the island, and they did it. It's really heroic. And I'm going to pick it up right here. The only battalion commander to get ashore in his planned position was Major Henry P. Crow. His 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, was attached to Colonel David Shope's 2nd Marines. Crow landed on Red 3 at the base of the long pier. There was a huge long pier on the north side of Tarwa, and that's where they landed, to the west of that. The 3 assault waves mounted in Amtraks got ashore in fairly good order, but the boats of the 4th and 5th wave ground on the reef and came under heavy fire from every weapon the Japanese could bring to bear. Bailey is a lieutenant. He's a tank commander, a lieutenant tank commander. Bailey recalled being held at the Navy control boat at the line of departure and seeing the wreck of the Sudou Maru, and it was sunk there, and the Japanese put a gun emplacement on it. So he was looking at the wreck of the Sudou Maru, but taking no fire from it. At the last, the medium tanks were given the order to land, but even before the LCMs, and these LCM is the landing craft mechanized, and that's the boat that has the front door that opens. The LCMs approached the reef edge, and a murderous Japanese fire began to strike the boats. Colonel David Shope later wrote that it was intended that the tanks should hit the beach at about H+20, so 20 minutes after. One tank was to precede the wave of tanks by at least 400 yards to test the reef conditions and the depth of water, etc. They were trying to, he was the test tank, basically. The amount, accuracy, and caliber of the enemy weapons brought to bear on the tank lighters rather disrupted the plan, and in general the tanks landed where they could to get ashore. In an LCM off Red 3, Joe Woolham was sitting atop his tank turret. We were all sitting up there watching the show. First it was the ships shelling, then they shut down, and here comes the planes. As we got closer to shore, all of a sudden the big shell hit so close to us, water splashed up and the concussion. Whew. So, we're like gophers, he says. We're like gophers as they scramble to get inside the tank. I turned on the electric traverse. Now the electric traverse is the thing that turns the turret. I turned on the electric traverse, and I'm trying to find me where I'm going to start shooting. I want to have me targets lined up. I'm turning like this, and the big one hit. Either it hit after the landing craft or could have hit the tank. A big bang, and my electric traverse, I can't get it shut off. And here we go. The turret's going around and around. So he's out in the middle of the water trying to find a target, and his turret won't stop. It's going around and around. So I have to turn it off and get the manual traverse, which means he's cranking it. Woolham could not locate any targets amid the smoke and the wreckage. Casualties mounted quickly, and the worst carnage was on Red 1. Colonel David Shope ordered Shodel to land his reserve on Red 2 and attack westward. Just before 1000 hours, Shodel replied, "We haven't got anything left to land." It was an indication of how bad the situation was. Shope ordered his only reserve tank to land on Red 2 and attack westward to assist Mike Ryan on Red 1. Instead, the fire from the pocket. Now the fire from the pocket, what he's talking about, the pocket was an enemy strong point that had a bunch of different gun emplacements, and they were in between Red 1 and Red 2. So it split them right down the middle. That's just, they ended up landing there. The pocket split the battalion, with some landing on Red 2, but the substantial number driving right on to land on Red 1. As planned, the Recon Guides were among the first men from Charlie Company into the water. PFC Marvin Swango landed on Red 1 with 21 other Marines at H+14, a few minutes before the tanks. Our mission was to guide the tanks around the bomb craters on the 800 yards of reef. So they were looking for bomb craters. The recon guides, were looking for bomb craters in the water because the tanks couldn't see them and it would sink the tank. If the tank hit the crater, it would have sunk. They outfitted us with some floats about the size of a soccer ball. We each had 3 floats with about 6 foot of cord and an anchor. Swango actually underestimated the difficulty of the assignment. The reef edge was about 1,200 yards from the beach. The recon guides were supposed to mark a clear lane on Red 1 and then work their way east to mark paths for the tank platoons on Red 2 and Red 3. Clearly, the difficulty of their assignment had been underestimated. Swango says there were about 20 of us in all in one Higgins boat. By the time we hit the edge of the reef, the machine gun fire was so intense it was tearing through the bulkheads of the Higgins boat. I would have guessed that maybe 5 or 6 men fell to the deck there, either killed or wounded. We just left them in the boat and they took them back to the ship. Sergeant Zeiker, who was in charge of our group, was hit by gunfire in the Higgins boat. He never left the boat. It didn't matter because we all knew what we had to do anyway. Swango and the remaining guides took the floats belonging to the casualties. As quickly as possible, the guides dove into the water where they could at least be smaller targets and avoid the fire directed at the boat. They landed us right at the edge of the reef and we started wading in. The plan to mark the craters with floats quickly deteriorated under the heavy machine gun fire, with the floats drifting away. The concept was we spread out in a single line, spacing ourselves far enough apart as possible, but still being able to see any craters that might appear between us. Without marker floats, the guides became human markers. Wherever we found a bomb crater, one man would stand there and wave the tank around it. Because if the tank got into the bomb crater, the men couldn't get out. It would sink like a rock. Swango continued. Our tanks were watching us as they plowed through the water, exhaust roaring like some terrible denizen of the deep. Occasionally, one of the tank hatches would tilt slightly, and one of our buddies would wave a friendly salute from within the dark confines. Finally, all the tanks had passed. The machine gun fire was so intense that it was like raindrops in the water all around us. Each time I looked around, there would be fewer of us. A man would simply sink beneath the water, and that would be the end of him. Most of the tanks got in. Then it was up to us to follow the tanks in, if there were any of us left, and replace the tank crew casualties wherever necessary. I only know of 3 who survived. There was myself, Corporal Charlie T. Kaiser, and another man. Charlie Kaiser had his kidney ruptured by an underwater concussion while he was on the reef. I always thought of it as a suicide mission. I don't see how any of us could have survived. Another of the recon guides on Red 1 was Private Edwin H. Vansel, who had twice been reduced in rank while in training at Pendleton. Vansel was awarded the Silver Star, defying constant danger from the enemy machine guns and mortar fire while assisting his unit in laying an 1,800-yard lane of channel markers over the shell and bomb-packed coral reef. Private Vansel valiantly made himself a human marker in order to assist the tanks to a successful landing on the beachhead when the floats were carried away by the heavy surf. If judged by the number of personnel, the Charlie Company reconnaissance guides were probably the most highly decorated small unit on the bitterly contested island. On Red 1, Private James Toby, USMC retired, unhesitatingly served as a human marker under intense, persistent enemy fire. Toby was awarded the Navy Cross for this and later actions. So he was a frickin' hero, because he was out there in water, probably up to his chest, being shot at from the machine guns, and he stayed there and he waved the tanks in. Tarwa was a clusterfuck. There is no doubt about it. The planners got it wrong initially with the tides and the timing of the tides, and then things just went bad. And this gives you just a little bit of an idea of what happened that day on the 20th of November 1943. And I think it's one of the most valiant fights that the Marines made. I'm proud of you guys.